This episode explores historical, cultural, and philosophical perspectives for educational purposes. The interpretations and opinions expressed are based on academic and historical research and are not intended to represent or criticize any modern government, individual, or belief system.
Welcome to The Deep Dive, the single best shortcut to being well-informed, where we slice through stacks of complex sources, from historical treatises to contemporary research, and extract the essential insights you need.
Today, we are undertaking a truly ambitious deep dive. We are stepping back across, 3 millennia of Indian civilization, examining sources that define the absolute foundation of governance, morality, and national conviction.
Our sources are breathtakingly broad, aren't they? We're moving from the tactical, almost ruthless precision of the ancient Arthashastra, essentially a manual for running an empire.
Exactly.
To the ethical blueprint of Mahatma Gandhi's revolutionary political resistance forged in South Africa.
And then we connect that thread right up to the contemporary struggle over national identity, linguistic diversity, and the massive constant challenge of preserving India's irreplaceable cultural heritage. It's quite a journey.
It really is.
The central mission today, I think, is to uncover this enduring tension that has shaped India's political life since antiquity. We're asking, how does a nation balance material success, state power,
right,
with dharma righteousness, moral order? What is the moral obligation of the powerful?
And maybe crucially, how does a country defined by such staggering diversity, with hundreds of languages and belief systems, how does it define and consolidate itself into a single, cohesive political entity?
That's the core question, really.
Okay, let's unpack this. When we lay this source material side by side, the contrast and maybe the connection too, it's startling. We look at Kautilya prescribing, absolute secrecy and an elaborate surveillance state.
Complete with undercover agents.
And then you fast forward 2,000 years to Gandhi, defining Satyagraha as a weapon wielded only by the morally strongest, demanding absolute public truth and the positive abandonment of hatred. It's almost polar opposites.
It seems like it, but that juxtaposition is the very essence of this deep dive, I think. It shows that the debate between, let's call it, realpolitik and righteousness, it's not theoretical. It is the living tension that dictates political decisions in India, whether you are running the Mauryan Empire in 300 BC or, managing a diverse democracy today.
So we really have to understand both sides of that equation.
Absolutely. To grasp modern India, you need both Kautilya and Gandhi, in a sense.
Okay, let's begin with that ancient blueprint for state management, Kautilya's Arthashastra. And, forget any idea you might have of abstract philosophy. This text usually linked with the rise of Chandragupta Maurya.
Right, around the 4th century BC.
It's an operating manual. It's an incredibly detailed, comprehensive guide for running a vast, centralized state apparatus.
The level of institutional detail here is really what gives the Arthashastra its power and, its reputation. It doesn't just suggest a king should have advisors like you might expect.
No, it goes way beyond that.
It meticulously lays out the structure, the job descriptions, the necessary institutional framework to ensure the king controlled vast resources, trade routes, domains across a huge geographical area.
And when we talk about meticulous, we mean down to the specific civil service roles, don't we? Kautilya prescribes superintendents for almost every facet of life and economy needed for, an advanced agrarian society and a powerful military.
Absolutely. Beyond the predictable ones for the military. Ships, horses, elephants, chariots, infantry.
Standard military stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
We find roles deep within the civilian economy. You have superintendents for revenue collection, which is obviously critical.
Of course.
And also for specific public services like issuing passports, managing pasture lands, even things like standardizing weights and measures. Very practical.
And the detail that always surprises modern readers, the one that often becomes a talking point about the sheer comprehensiveness of the Mauryan state, is the specific superintendent designated for prostitutes.
Yes, the Ganikaryaksa.
What does that inclusion tell us about Kautilya's actual priorities for state control? Is it just about tax?
Well, tax is certainly part of it. Revenue generation from state-controlled or licensed activities was always important. But it tells us Kautilya understood that a large, complex, bustling empire creates both wealth and, vice. And the state has to manage both.
So it's not just moral policing.
Not primarily. The inclusion of a superintendent for courtesans or prostitutes was also critically part of the state's intelligence network and, to some extent, public health management.
Ah, intelligence. That makes sense.
Definitely. These individuals moved throughout high and low society. They were potentially invaluable sources of information, often serving as, let's say, clandestine intelligence assets. So regulating them, knowing who they were, where they operated, it was essential for internal security.
So this incredible precision, this detail, it extends directly into the core issue of political stability, which, for Kautilya, always seemed to supersede pretty much all other concerns.
Absolutely.
This is statecraft based on profound organization and profound suspicion, isn't it?
That's the key distinction, I think. Kautilya did not implicitly trust his officials. Not at all. What's truly fascinating is the sheer sophistication of the espionage network designed explicitly to monitor the government officials themselves.
Not just foreign spies or enemies.
No, primarily his own bureaucracy. He needed eyes and ears everywhere to prevent corruption, collusion, potential rebellion, all the things that could undermine the state from within.
And these weren't just, low-level gossips hanging around the market.
Far from it. The source details an institutionalized system. Spies operated in various deeply integrated undercover guises. We hear of mendicant women, householders, merchants, ascetics.
People who just blend in naturally.
Exactly. People who wouldn't arouse suspicion as they gathered information on the conduct, the loyalty, even the private character of ministers and officers.
And how did they report back? Surely that was risky.
Crucially, they had to communicate sensitive reports without being detected. The Arthashastra mentions using predetermined methods like signs or significantly codified writing samishnaalapivi.
Secret codes.
Basically, yes. This level of protocol shows two things. One, the security of the information was paramount, and two, espionage wasn't some ad hoc arrangement. It was a highly organized bureaucratic division of the state, treated with the same institutional rigor as, say, the Treasury or the Army Command.
This intense secrecy, then, it's driven by the supreme principle of protecting the king and his plans. The text explicitly warns, doesn't it, that no outside person shall know anything of the work which the king has in view.
Total operational security. Information must be tightly held, compartmentalized, and controlled by the king until the very moment of execution. Leaks could be fatal.
And yet, there's a twist, isn't there? On the flip side of this absolute secrecy, Kautilya introduces a necessary counterweight, a requirement for counsel. He doesn't advocate for the king deciding everything alone.
No, he's very clear on that. He actually cites an earlier sage, Visalaksha, who argued emphatically that no deliberation made by a single person will be successful. The king needs advice.
That's a fascinating constraint on what seems like absolute power. While the king must hold the ultimate secrets, Kautilya acknowledges that success is actually impossible without advice. Unilateral decision-making is deemed, well, likely to fail.
It is.
So how do you reconcile those two demands? Absolute secrecy to prevent leaks, but essential counsel to ensure a wise decision. That seems like a contradiction.
It implies a very tightly controlled inner circle. Think of it maybe as a highly compartmentalized cabinet system, perhaps. Different parts of a strategy might be known only by those few ministers who absolutely need to know to execute their part.
Need-to-know basis?
Pretty much. It's a delicate balance, almost Machiavellian before Machiavelli. You gather all the data, often secretly through spies. You consult wisely with trusted advisors. But you, as the king, keep the overall strategic picture opaque until the final command. The king must be the sole point of synthesis for all the intelligence and all the advice.
This careful balancing act leads us directly to the moral dimension, doesn't it? The interplay of Dharma and Artha. Kautilya often gets pigeonholed as this arch-pragmatist who prioritized Artha, material gain, power at all costs. But the sources show Dharma-righteous conduct was hardly ignored.
It wasn't ignored at all. I'd argue it was operationalized. The word dharma appears explicitly throughout the Arthashastra. It's not just pushed aside, but it moves beyond a purely spiritual or metaphysical definition.
How so?
It gets integrated into practical statecraft. It establishes a necessary ethical framework, even if, and this is key, that framework often serves the greater good of state stability and endurance. Dharma becomes a tool of statecraft in a way.
And we see this integration most clearly in the highest stakes political scenario, war. When the pursuit of Artha, of power and territory, reaches its peak, the Arthashastra doesn't just say win at all costs. It provides highly evolved guidelines on Dharma.
Yes, it dictates not just how to wage war, there are rules of engagement of sorts, but critically, how to manage the ensuing peace. What do you do after you've won?
That seems crucial for long-term stability.
It is. And just to connect this ancient concept to the modern context briefly, think about how Mahatma Gandhi utilized it. In Hind Swaraj, when he needed to define the ethical foundations for his resistance movement.
A very different context.
Totally different. He intentionally sidestepped the deep, complex philosophical layers of Dharma. He defined it simply, powerfully as religion or ethics. He stripped it down to its political and moral essence, making it accessible, making it a foundation for mass mobilization. He operationalized it in his own way.
That's a great comparison. Okay, returning to Kautilya, maybe the most brilliant application of this ethical pragmatism comes in his post-war ethics. You mentioned managing the peace. The sources detail this in Sutras 13.5.7 of 8.
They do. And these aren't just moral platitudes like, be nice to the conquered. There are concrete instructions for long-term political survival after a conquest.
What do they advise?
They detail exactly how a victorious king should treat the vanquished population. He must, and this is specific, adopt a character, dress, language, and behavior similar to the subjects he just conquered.
So, assimilate himself to them, not the other way around.
Precisely. Furthermore, he is explicitly instructed to participate in their local festivals, their traditions, even their sports.
Why? This doesn't sound like rubbing their noses in defeat.
Yeah.
This sounds strategic.
Yeah.
Is this Kautilya being kind or clever?
It is the ultimate strategy for political legitimacy and state endurance. It's profoundly clever. A military victory only wins you the land, the territory. Cultural integration, or at least the appearance of it, wins the hearts and minds, or at least dampens immediate resistance.
So by adopting local customs, speaking their language, wearing their clothes, showing up at their festivals, the victorious king transforms himself.
Exactly. He shifts from being an external conqueror, an alien ruler, into potentially an internal guarantor of stability, someone who respects their way of life. He's neutralizing dissent not just by force, but by validating the defeated population's identity and culture.
It turns military conquest into political legitimacy.
And ensures the long-term continuation of his new expanded domain. It prevents resentment from festering into rebellion.
That is a critical insight. It really shows that in ancient Indian statecraft, even when prioritizing power, artha, moral consideration, dharma, wasn't just a constraint. It was integrated because it was seen as the most effective tool for long-term success.
Dharma as a function of artha in some ways. And this sense of ethical governance, moral obligation, even this pragmatic morality, it was drawn in large part from the great narrative traditions that shaped the subcontinent, the epics.
All right, we have to talk about the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. The sources categorize them as itihasa. What does that term actually imply?
Itihasa basically means, thus indeed it was. These narratives weren't viewed merely as fiction or mythology in the way we might use those terms today. Within the tradition, they were treated as historical accounts, or at least as narratives containing historical truth and profound moral lessons drawn from the past. They were powerful moral and political reference points.
So like foundational stories that everyone knew and drew lessons from.
Exactly. And importantly, these epic narratives weren't just optional reading for rulers. Kautilya's syllabus for the king's education, the training program he outlines, explicitly prescribed the study of Itihasa as a didactic tool, a teaching tool.
So the future king learned practical statecraft from the Arthashastra itself.
But his ethical judgment, his understanding of duty, sacrifice, consequences, his moral courage that was meant to be forged in the fire of these epic conflicts and dilemmas, the Mahabharata especially is just full of morally gray areas.
That combination is potent, isn't it? Yeah. Bureaucratic precision from Kautilya combined with this deep, epic moral training from the Itihasa.
It aimed to create a ruler who was both effective and, ideally, righteous, or at least understood the importance of righteousness.
Speaking of the epics, the sheer range of scholarly dating for the Kurukshetra War. The central conflict of the Mahabharata, you see, dates from 6000 BC all the way down to maybe 500 BC.
It's a huge range.
It really underscores that the precise historical chronology is perhaps less important, within the tradition at least, than the enduring moral and political lessons contained within the narrative itself.
Exactly. The power lies in the story and its ethical teachings, regardless of when exactly it happened, or even if it happened exactly as described. Take the story of Uttaka, for instance, from the Mahabharata.
Okay, what's that one about?
It's a fascinating side story. Uttaka is a devoted disciple who undergoes great trials to get a specific pair of earrings for his guru's wife as a final offering, a guru dakshina. He faces serpents, deception, all sorts of obstacles.
So a quest narrative.
A classic quest. And it's steeped in the notion of determination leading to divine aid and profound spiritual guidance. It shows that dedication to a task, however difficult or seemingly insurmountable, can yield ultimate reward, sometimes in unexpected ways.
Let's dwell on a specific anecdote from his journey because the details are so illustrative of faith and guidance. Utanka, on his quest, encounters a man mounted on a gigantic bull.
Right, this imposing figure.
Which we were later told is actually Indra, the king of the gods, riding his divine elephant Airavata, who appears as a bull in this instance.
A divine encounter in disguise.
And this man advises Utanka to do something quite strange. Eat the dung of the bull.
Not exactly appealing advice.
No. Utanka is hesitant, naturally, but he eventually does it. Partly because he remembers or realizes that his own revered guru had also partaken of it earlier on a similar journey. He trusts the guide, even when the instruction seems repulsive.
And that seemingly bizarre act of following the guide's instruction, of trusting the path despite its unpleasantness, leads to his salvation in that part of the story. The bull dung, it turns out, was Amrita, the nectar of immortality.
So it wasn't dung at all.
It was a divine substance in disguise, which saved him from peril in Nagaloka, the land of serpents he had to navigate. The lesson here is sort of twofold, isn't it?
What are the two parts?
First, it teaches the importance of sheer determination, of sticking to your duty, your task. But second, and perhaps more subtly, it teaches the profound importance of faith, or shraddha, in your guide, in the path, even when faced with a deeply uncomfortable or seemingly irrational instruction. Trust the process, trust the guide.
That's a very different kind of lesson from Kautilya's pragmatism.
It is. It's about inner resolve and faith. Now contrast that spiritual focus, that reliance on faith, with the absolute unyielding concentration required for practical mastery, which is exemplified in another famous epic story, Drona's instruction to Arjuna during the archery test.
Right, the story of the bird in the tree.
Exactly. Drona, the great martial guru, is testing his students, the Pandava and Kaurava princes. He sets up a target, a wooden vulture in a tree, and asks each student, one by one, what they see as they take aim.
And the other students give broader answers.
Yes, they say, I see the tree, I see the branches, I see the bird in the sky, I see you, my brothers. They see the whole context.
But not Arjuna.
Not Arjuna. When Drona asks him, Arjuna gives that famous, focused reply. I see only the head of the vulture, not its body.
Nothing else exists for him in that moment.
Precisely, and Drona is delighted. He says, shoot, because that singular laser focus on the objective, excluding everything else, means mastery is achieved, victory is assured.
So in the context of ancient political training, combining the Arthashastra and the Itihasa, this story teaches the mastery of concentration.
Yes. The ability to focus solely on the state's objective, whether that objective is righteous like Arjuna's or perhaps more ruthless like something Kautilya might advise. This ancient wisdom emphasized that unyielding concentration, that single-minded focus, is the prerequisite for political, military, or even moral success in achieving a specific goal. You need both the ethical grounding and the focus to execute.
We are now moving forward, quite dramatically in time, from the ancient centralized blueprint of power in the Arthashastra to the furnace of 20th century anti-colonial resistance in South Africa.
Yes, the very specific context that forged Mahatma Gandhi's defining political philosophy, Satyagraha.
And this is a critical pivot point, isn't it? Because the foundation of Gandhi's political action wasn't some abstract demand for freedom initially. It was a deeply concrete response to economic exploitation, and frankly, profound betrayal faced by Indian indentured laborers there.
Exactly. We really have to understand why Indians were in Natal in the first place to grasp the urgency and the nature of the resistance that emerged. It wasn't accidental.
So what was the situation? Why were they brought there?
Well, English settlers in Natal in the mid to late 19th century had established huge plantations, sugarcane, tea, coffee, big agricultural businesses.
Okay.
They needed reliable, cheap labor. They discovered that the local Zulu population, the indigenous Africans, generally worked only for limited periods, maybe 6 months a year, which wasn't enough for the continuous cultivation cycles of these cash crops. It was economically unsustainable for their model.
They needed a permanent, year-round workforce.
Desperately. So they negotiated with the then British government of India for indentured laborers. These were Indians, mostly from poorer backgrounds, recruited on contracts, promising them passage, wages, and crucially a new life with the possibility of settling as free citizens in Natal after their 5-year indenture period was completed.
It sounded like an opportunity, a way out of poverty for many.
It was presented as such, a contractual arrangement that was supposed to lead to citizenship, land ownership, prosperity.
But the reality, once they served their time,
The reality was a devastating betrayal. Once those 5 years of indentures were complete, and these laborers had contributed their skills and, frankly, their incredibly hard toil to build Natal's colonial economy.
having fulfilled their side of the bargain.
Absolutely. The planters and the wider white settler community launched an aggressive political agitation against them.
Against the very people who had built their wealth. Why?
Their clear goal, stated quite openly, was to make it economically and legally impossible for these now ex-indentured laborers, often called coolies derogatorily, to live as free men in Natal. They didn't want a settled, free Indian population competing with them or asserting rights.
How did they try to achieve that?
The agitation took several insidious forms. Some demanded compulsory repatriation, basically, kicking them back to India after they'd served their use, completely erasing their contribution and their right to stay.
Wow.
Others, perhaps more cunningly, advocated for a heavy annual capitation tax, a poll tax, specifically levied on those ex-indentured Indians who refused to sign up for another period of indenture.
So pay a crippling tax or go back into servitude.
That was pretty much the choice. It was designed as perpetual debt slavery by regulation, either drive them out or trap them back into the plantation labor system. Interestingly, the sources note that an independent commission appointed by the Natal government itself actually found evidence against the agitators' claims, noting the laborers were economically beneficial and generally law-abiding.
But the politics ignored the facts.
The political will to oppress them, driven by racial prejudice and economic fear among the settlers, was simply too strong. The commission's findings were largely ignored.
It's into this climate of betrayal and rising oppression that Gandhi arrives.
Yes, initially just for a legal case in 1893. But the spark that ignited his long-term involvement, the start of organized political resistance, happened quite unexpectedly in 1894.
What happened?
Gandhi was actually preparing to return to India. His legal work was done. He was attending a farewell party held for him by a prominent Indian merchant, Dada Abdullah. It was a seemingly mundane social gathering.
Just saying goodbye.
Exactly. Until someone casually handed him a copy of the local newspaper, the Natal Mercury.
And he saw something.
He saw a small news clipping. It detailed the proceedings of the Natal Legislative Assembly. Specifically, it reported on a proposed bill to disenfranchise Indians to take away their right to vote, even for those few who qualified.
A direct political attack.
Gandhi realized instantly that this wasn't just another economic hardship or social discrimination. He saw it for what it was. The first nail in our coffin, as he later put it. The beginning of the end of any rights they had.
So he understood the significance immediately.
Immediately. He explained the situation right there at the farewell party to the traders present. He urged them to resist strenuously, emphasizing that if they lost the right to vote, they would eventually lose every other right thereafter. Political powerlessness would lead to total vulnerability.
How did they react?
They immediately agreed they had to fight. But crucially, they begged him to stay and lead the effort. They admitted, quite frankly, their own inability to navigate the legislative and political complexities, to draft petitions, to argue the case effectively.
They needed his skills, his education.
They needed his leadership.
Yeah.
Gandhi consented to stay for just one more month to help organize the initial response, which famously turned into 20 years in South Africa.
An entire political lifetime almost.
And that very night, spurred by the urgency, he drafted the first petition ever sent by Indians to a South African legislature. They instantly formed a committee, with Sheth Haji Adam, another influential merchant, as chairman. This was the birth of organized Indian political resistance in South Africa, right there in response to that newspaper article.
Incredible. And this initial resistance eventually led, years later, to the major confrontation over the Asiatic Registration Act, the so-called Black Act in the Transvaal.
Yes, that became the focal point of the Satyagraha movement from about 1906 onwards. The act required all Asians to register, be fingerprinted, and carry identification certificates at all times under penalty of deportation. It was deeply humiliating.
And the community pledged to resist it. The drama surrounding the oath they took was crucial, wasn't it?
It really was. The sources mentioned Sheth Haji Habib, another merchant leader, who unexpectedly suggested during a mass meeting that they should all take an oath, a solemn vow before God, to resist the act, even unto death.
That must have raised the stakes enormously.
It did. Gandhi himself was initially surprised by the suggestion of a religious oath in a political meeting, but he quickly saw the profound psychological power and necessity of that absolute pledge. It galvanized the community, transforming passive disagreement into active, committed resistance.
And the most personal, maybe the most physical manifestation of this resistance, and the compromises involved, revolved around that requirement for identification, specifically the 10 fingerprints.
Yes, the fingerprinting was a huge sticking point. The system of identification itself was seen as degrading, but the requirement for all 10 fingerprints carried a particularly deep shame and symbolic weight.
Why the 10 fingerprints specifically?
A Pathan friend confronted Gandhi directly about this, asking, "Shall we have to give 10 fingerprints under the settlement?" This was so sensitive because, as the sources remind us, in India at that time, providing all 10 fingerprints was a procedure required only from common criminals or members of designated criminal tribes. It was a mark of criminality.
So, submitting to it voluntarily felt like accepting the status of a criminal.
Exactly. Gandhi himself had previously argued forcefully that submitting fingerprints under the compulsion of the Black Act would be a sin, a betrayal of their dignity.
Yet, the sources detail a crucial and perhaps controversial shift in his stance later on, don't they?
They do. This happened during negotiations where a potential compromise was reached. General Smuts, representing the Transvaal government, made a promise, a verbal promise, importantly, to repeal the discriminatory Black Act if the Indian community registered voluntarily first as a gesture of goodwill.
A promise contingent on them complying first.
Right. And Gandhi, after much soul-searching, advised the community to accept this compromise and register voluntarily. His reasoning was complex. He argued that once a promise was made by the government, even by an opponent, it was their sacred duty, as Satyagrahis who relied on truth, to trust that promise and help the government fulfill its part, even if the registration process itself was distasteful and involved the humiliating fingerprints.
Trust, but verify. Or just trust.
More like trust as a moral principle. It was a gamble based on the power of their own truthfulness, potentially evoking truthfulness in the opponent.
And the true moment of conviction, or perhaps the burden of leadership, came with his personal choice, didn't it? He had to decide whether he would register.
Yes. He decided he could not advise others to do something he himself refused to do, especially something so contentious. So he went to register voluntarily. And famously, he was assaulted by some militant Pathans who saw his voluntary registration as a betrayal. But even after recovering, he insisted on fulfilling his promise and gave his own 10 fingerprints.
Wow.
He admitted later the act caused him pain. But this underscores the complexity of Satyagraha. It's not merely about defiance. It sometimes involves calculated compromise, tactical retreats, and even marrying personal humiliation for what is perceived as a greater strategic or moral good in this case, holding the government to its promise by fulfilling their side first.
It's a very demanding philosophy.
Extremely demanding. And this whole struggle, this complexity, necessitated a fundamental clarification from Gandhi. The movement was constantly being misidentified, especially by opponents and the press, as passive resistance.
A term he actively rejected.
He hated it because he felt it fundamentally misrepresented the core nature and, crucially, the inherent strength of his philosophy.
Okay, let's break that down. What fundamentally is the core difference? Why was passive resistance the wrong label when the actions like non-cooperation, boycotts, often look similar on the surface?
Passive resistance, as Gandhi understood and critiqued it, is essentially a weapon of the weak. Or perhaps more accurately, a strategy employed by those who lack the means for active physical resistance at that moment.
So it's passive because they don't have another choice.
Largely, yes. Because it's born of weakness, it permits, even implicitly relies on, feelings like hatred or bitterness towards the opponent. And crucially, it always leaves scope for the eventual use of arms, of violence, if and when the opportunity arises or circumstances become more favorable. It's seen as a temporary measure until strength can be gathered for a real fight.
And opponents picked up on this.
Yes. Opponents, like a Mr. Hoskin mentioned in the sources, often view the South African Indians through this lens. They saw them as either inherently weak and therefore contemptible, or potentially dangerous, like, say, the suffragists in Britain at the time, who sometimes resorted to property destruction or violence. The passive resistance label lumped them in with that.
Okay, so how is Satyagraha fundamentally different then?
Satyagraha, conversely, is explicitly defined by Gandhi as a weapon, or rather a force, for the strong. Its strength is predicated entirely on moral courage, on truth, satya, and non-violence, ahimsa, not on physical capability or expediency.
So the nonviolence isn't just tactical, it's the core principle.
It's the absolute core. In Satyagraha, physical force and hatred are positively forbidden. They are rejected as principles, even when one's circumstances or the opponent's weakness might make the use of arms seem effective or easy. You choose nonviolence from a position of inner strength, not outer weakness.
That distinction seems vital for understanding the psychology of the movement.
It's absolutely vital because it determines the movement's potential strength and trajectory. If practitioners offer passive resistance and fundamentally believe themselves weak or merely waiting for a chance to use force, their resistance, Gandhi argued, will never make them truly strong. It only postpones or displaces the conflict.
But Satyagraha works differently.
Yes. If they are Satyagrahis and believe themselves strong, imbued with the inherent moral strength of adhering to truth and nonviolence, then Gandhi believed they grow stronger daily through the very practice of resistance. This self-belief, this reliance on moral force rather than external power, actually increases the movement's effectiveness exponentially over time.
It's like an internal alchemy you said earlier, strength through nonviolence itself.
Exactly. It aims to transform not only the situation, but also the practitioner, and ideally even the opponent, through the power of truth and self-suffering.
But this profound ethical reliance on nonviolence, this demanding path, it wasn't universally accepted as the only path to independence for India, was it? Even by those who passionately desired freedom just as much.
Not at all. And this brings us to that famous defining divergence within the Indian nationalist movement, the conflict in ideology and strategy between Mahatma Gandhi and Subhash Chandra Bose.
Two giants of the independence movement, but with fundamentally different approaches.
Completely different. This conflict really represents the binary choice, the fundamental dilemma faced by Indian nationalism. Do you prioritize ethical means, Gandhi, or do you prioritize practical results, potentially achieved through any means necessary?
So Gandhi championed nonviolence, ahimsa, as we've discussed, civil disobedience. And he stressed internal reform, self-reliance, encapsulated by the Swadeshi movement, focusing on strengthening India from the village level up.
A sort of bottom-up, morally driven approach.
Whereas Bose,
particularly later in his career, completely rejected this incremental, non-violent approach as too slow, too ineffective against a ruthless colonial power like Britain. He came to advocate for immediate, decisive military struggle.
Force was the only language the British would understand, in his view.
That was his conviction. And this conviction drove his strategy of seeking external military collaboration with anti-British powers during World War II, specifically Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan.
Through the Indian National Army, the INA.
Exactly. He aimed to raise an army equipped and supported by Britain's enemies to invade India and forcibly liberate it.
The sources reveal that Bose's political concepts, his turn towards militarism, weren't just a sudden decision, were they? They developed over time.
No, they weren't hastily formed in the heat of the moment. The sources suggest they were fully developed and crystallized during his extended period of imprisonment by the British in Burma, in Mandalay, from 1924 to 1927.
Imprisonment hardened his views.
It seems so. He went into prison as an active, fiery political agitator, certainly, but the source describes him leaving after over 2 years of confinement and reflection as a hardened, hesitant male of 31. That period seems crucial. He apparently used the time in prison to systematically classify his ideas, study revolutionary movements elsewhere, and design his future strategy for, essentially, an armed revolt against British rule.
And the logical conclusion of this hardened resolve, this meticulously planned strategy, was his dramatic escape from house arrest in Calcutta, what he himself called the Great Adventure.
A truly audacious move. This took place under the cover of darkness on the midnight of January 16, 1941. He slipped away from surveillance, traveled incognito across India, then through Afghanistan and Central Asia to eventually reach Germany.
And his mission was utterly clear from that point.
Utterly clear. To secure military assistance from anti-British overseas powers, first Germany, then later Japan, for the liberation of India. This escape led directly to his leadership of the Free India Center in Berlin, his broadcast India, and ultimately his command of the INA, which fought alongside Japanese forces against the British in the Burma campaign and Northeast India during the crucial final years of World War II.
It's important to note, too, their divergence wasn't just about the tactics of achieving independence violence versus nonviolence. It was also about their vision for the future structure of the Indian state, wasn't it?
Yes, that's a critical point often overlooked. Gandhi envisioned a future India that was radically decentralized, a nation built from the grassroots up, based on self-reliant, self-governing village republics, Gram Swaraj, power flowing upwards from the people.
Almost anarchistic in its decentralization.
In some ways, yes. Whereas Bose, influenced perhaps by the models he saw in Germany, Italy, and even Soviet Russia to some extent, advocated for a strong, centralized, authoritarian government, at least in the initial post-independence phase.
Why authoritarian?
He believed India needed a powerful state focused on immediate military strength, rapid industrialization, and enforcing political unity to quickly modernize the nation, overcome its internal divisions, and assert its place on the world stage. Discipline and order were paramount for him.
So it really is that ancient conflict playing out again, isn't it? Gandhi's emphasis on dharma, on ethical means and decentralized power versus Bose's focus on artha, on state power, effectiveness, and achieving the goal of a strong nation quickly. Replayed on the massive stage of 20th century nationalism.
It's a perfect encapsulation of that enduring tension, yes.
Okay, moving now into the period after independence, into the immense challenges of actually defining and sustaining a sovereign India. Once freedom was achieved in 1947, the question immediately arose. How do you take this subcontinent, this entity defined by, frankly, colossal internal diversity, linguistic, religious, cultural, and consolidate it into a single, cohesive nation state?
A monumental task. And this necessity, this challenge, really drove Jawaharlal Nehru's vigorous promotion of the concept of unity in diversity. This wasn't just a nice slogan for him, it was a core political and intellectual strategy.
He explored it in depth in his foundational work, The Discovery of India, written during his own imprisonment.
Yes, he articulated it there as essential for national consolidation. He argued that India's strength, its unique genius, lay precisely in its ability to absorb and synthesize diverse influences over millennia. Trying to impose a monolithic identity would destroy that essence.
It's interesting, the sources pull in philosophical parallels. The specific phrasing Nehru sometimes used, likening Indian society or even humanity to the vari-colored flowers of one garden, is also a prominent principle found, for example, in the Baha'i faith.
That's right. It shows that Nehru was tapping into, or at least resonant with, broader global and philosophical currents that embrace complexity and saw strength in diversity, rather than insisting on a rigid, perhaps artificially manufactured homogeneity, which was the path some other new nations took.
But embracing complexity in theory is one thing. It met an immediate and frankly explosive challenge in practical politics, didn't it? Particularly around the issue of language.
Oh, absolutely. The language question was arguably the most contentious issue debated in the Constituent Assembly, the body that drafted India's constitution. Should India, like many newly independent nations aiming for unity, adopt a single national language?
And the main candidate was Hindi.
Yes. The push to make Hindi, written in the Devanagari script, the sole national language, was certainly backed by powerful nationalist leaders, including initially Gandhi himself and figures like Rajendra Prasad, the Assembly's president. They saw it as a unifying force.
But the problem was?
Problem was demographics and power. Hindi was spoken, in its various dialects, by approximately 40% of the population, mainly in the north and central regions. Making it the sole national language was met with immediate, passionate, and strenuous opposition, especially from the representatives of the South Indian states, where Dravidian languages like Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, and Malayalam prevail.
What was their main fear?
The fear was profound and articulated very clearly in the assembly debates. Opponents argued that making Hindi the sole official language would instantly create a two-tier citizenship. It would permanently institutionalize a massive disadvantage for non-Hindi speaking regions in crucial areas like accessing government jobs through the civil service exams, participating effectively in parliamentary debates, accessing higher education, and generally wielding political power within the union.
They saw it as a form of linguistic imperialism from the north.
That was exactly the charge. One representative warned memorably that language means the very lifeblood of the nation. In settling language questions, mere theory of majority rules democracy must not prevail. Imposing Hindi, they argued, would fracture the very unity it aimed to create.
So how was this incredibly divisive issue resolved? It could have torn the new nation apart.
It really could have. It forced a brilliant and characteristically Indian constitutional compromise, a middle path. Article 343 of the Constitution adopted both Hindi and Devanagari script and English as the dual official languages of the Union government.
English. the language of the colonizers.
Yes, ironically. But English had become, by that point, a common administrative and educational language across different regions, particularly among the elites who were drafting the Constitution. It served as a neutral link language between Hindi and non-Hindi areas.
But wasn't English supposed to be temporary?
That was the plan. The Constitution included a 15-year sunset clause for English, envisioning a transition period during which Hindi would be promoted and eventually take over as the sole official language by 1965.
Did that happen?
No. As 1965 approached, the opposition, particularly from the South, intensified dramatically, leading to widespread protests, even riots. The fear of Hindi imposition hadn't gone away.
So the government had to back down?
Yes. The Official Languages Act of 1963 and subsequent amendments effectively extended the use of English indefinitely, alongside Hindi for official purposes. That sunset clause has never been enforced.
What does that tell us about the nature of the Indian Union?
It tells us that the constitutional settlement ultimately cemented multilingualism and regional linguistic identity at the very heart of the Union. It prioritized political stability achieved through accommodating diversity over the perhaps simpler but politically unviable goal of national homogeneity through a single language. Unity in diversity, not unity through uniformity.
However, even as leaders like Nehru were navigating these practicalities, the very notion of Indian nationalism, as pursued by these political leaders seeking a modern nation state, was subjected to a powerful and, well, a timeless critique much earlier by one of his greatest minds, Rabindranath Tagore.
Yes, Tagore, writing back in 1917 in his lectures on nationalism, offered a profoundly skeptical perspective.
What was his main argument?
He warned against what he termed the idolatry of nation. He observed that India, with its ancient civilization, its deep-rooted social structures and stratifications, had actually never developed a real sense of nationalism in the modern Western sense, that is, the sense of a unified, homogeneous, state-worshipping political entity. India's unity, he felt, was traditionally cultural and civilizational, not political in that narrow way.
And he saw danger in adopting this Western model.
He saw immense danger. His central warning was profound. Achieving political freedom from the British would not make India truly free if fundamental internal social weaknesses persisted. Blindly importing the Western political structure of the nation, he feared, would just create a new cage.
What weaknesses was he most concerned about?
He argued forcefully that India's own cherished social weaknesses, specifically citing the rigidities of the caste system and the tendency towards blind adherence to tradition and superstition, would inevitably create prison houses in politics.
How so? What's the connection between social weakness and political structure?
His logic was this. If citizens maintain a narrowness of sympathy in their social lives, if they can accept or impose social injustices like caste discrimination, that very rigidity, that lack of empathy and critical thinking, will translate directly into their political behavior. It will make the state structure they inhabit unforgiving, potentially autocratic, and resistant to internal reform.
So social pathologies inevitably become political pathologies.
That was his prophetic message. Whatever weakness you cherish in your society, whatever injustice you tolerate, will eventually become a source of danger and oppression in your politics. Political freedom requires social freedom, social reform. You can't build a healthy nation on a diseased society, was his essential point.
That's a challenging thought even today. And this tension between the political need for unity, the Nehruvian project, and the spiritual or social need for internal reform, Tagore's critique, it continues to play out today in one of the most visible and frankly vulnerable areas, the preservation of the nation's immense and irreplaceable cultural heritage.
Absolutely. The scale of the heritage preservation challenge in India is just staggering. You look at the official body, the Archaeological Survey of India, the ASI, it's tasked with managing about 3,691 nationally protected monuments and sites.
Which sounds like a lot.
It is a lot, and that includes 22 sites inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. But the critical insight from our sources is this. That number, while significant, is just the tip of the iceberg. There are lakhs, hundreds of thousands of other heritage structures, temples, forts, stepwells, traditional homes scattered across the country.
And who manages those?
They fall under the purview of state archaeology departments, local temple committees, private trusts, or sometimes nobody at all. They're unprotected or underprotected. This creates a management challenge far, far greater than the ASI's current capacity, even for the sites it is responsible for.
And these vast numbers of sites, both protected and unprotected, they're highly vulnerable, aren't they? Not just to natural decay, climate change.
No, although those are huge factors. They're also systemically vulnerable to organized looting and pillage. Theft driven by a global, highly lucrative black market for antiquities.
We need to look at the concrete data here to really grasp the severity of this illegal trade. What do the numbers tell us?
The numbers are stark. One report cited suggests that between 1992 and 2017, just from these centrally protected monuments, a reported 4,408 antiquities or significant items were stolen.
Over 4,000 items from supposedly protected sites.
Yes, and of those, police or authorities only ever intercepted or recovered about 1,493.
Which means?
It means nearly 3,000 items, 2,913, precisely according to that report, are feared lost, most likely shipped overseas into the international illicit market. And that's just from the ASI sites. The loss from state-protected or unprotected sites is likely orders of magnitude higher, but harder to track.
And once these artifacts get overseas, what happens? They don't just appear in a shop window, presumably.
No, it's a sophisticated operation. They enter a global illicit art market pipeline. These stolen objects are systematically laundered. They're given fake provenance, false histories, forged documents to sanitize their theft to make them appear legitimate.
Hiding their stolen origins.
Exactly. This laundering process allows them eventually to be sold, often quite openly, to high-paying private collectors, or even, disturbingly, to land in the collections of prestigious institutions, museums in Europe, North America, sometimes even Asia, often via well-known international auction houses. It completes a cycle of international crime profiting from cultural destruction.
Can we use specific examples to illustrate just how audacious this trade can be?
Yes, the sources provide some telling cases. Consider the theft of the Amin pillars, these ancient carved pillars, back in 1967. The originals were literally uprooted and stolen from their site. Years later, they were eventually found, incredibly, in London.
How were they discovered?
This is the really illustrative part. They were discovered because customs officials back in Bombay intercepted an identical pair of pillars being shipped out. But these intercepted pillars turned out to be expertly crafted fakes.
Fakes? Why ship fakes?
The suspicion is the fakes were intended to replace the originals at the site, or perhaps be sold as the originals once the theft was discovered, thereby covering up the loss of the actual artifacts which were already safely smuggled out. It shows a sophisticated supply chain that handles not just the theft, but also the elaborate cover-up.
That's incredible planning.
It is. And then you have the sheer volume associated with individual smuggling kingpins. The estimated haul connected to just one prolific smuggler, Subhash Kapoor, who operated for decades before being caught, is estimated to be in excess of $100 million worth of stolen Indian antiquities.
$100 million. That is not petty crime.
No, this is highly organized, transnational, corporate-level crime. It's targeting India's cultural capital, its history, for massive profit.
And just to remind ourselves what's being lost, what kind of historical value are we talking about? The sources mention Nalanda Mahavihara.
Yes, Nalanda, the great ancient university complex in Bihar, now a World Heritage Site. What is being protected there, what ASI manages, are the extensive structural remains of viharas. These are the residential and scholastic buildings, the monasteries and chaitas, the temple-like prayer halls.
What's significant about them?
These remains, excavated over many years, show a unique architectural evolution across centuries, from the Gupta period onwards. They reveal how monastic life was organized, how Buddhist thought developed. For example, the specific quincunxal or five-fold plan of some Nalanda chaitas is architecturally distinct. Losing even small sculptural elements or architectural fragments from a site like Nalanda isn't just losing an object, it's losing pages of written history, context that can never be fully recovered.
So preserving this level of heritage against decay, climate change, natural disasters, and this highly organized crime, it obviously demands incredibly specialized skills. Scientific skills, conservation skills.
Highly specialized, yes. Modern archaeology and conservation are complex sciences now.
Yet, our sources reveal significant systemic deficiencies in modernizing the management structure of the ASI itself, the main body responsible, to meet this huge challenge.
This seems to be the core structural failure identified in the analysis. There is a recognized critical absence of specialized expertise within the ASI framework.
Like what kind of expertise?
Well, for example, the sources state that for the entire country, with its hundreds of thousands of potential sites needing analysis, the ASI officially has only one expert listed in the field of archaeobotany that's studying ancient plant remains to understand past environments and agriculture.
one expert for all of India.
Apparently so, sourced from specialized institutes, and only 2 listed in archaeozoology, studying ancient animal remains. And, maybe most shockingly, no geoarchaeology expert specialists who study the relationship between archaeological sites and their landscape evolution listed in the available central pool of expertise.
How can they possibly manage, analyze, and conserve such a vast and complex heritage without these foundational scientific experts required for modern archaeological work?
It creates a crippling bottleneck. The analysis suggests the need is clearly for restructuring the ASI, for creating dedicated wings for conservation science, for attracting high-level talent to manage complex conservation projects, design world-class site museums, and prepare the incredibly detailed nomination dossiers required for World Heritage status.
But there's a problem attracting that talent.
Yes. And the systemic difficulty identified is, perhaps predictably, the pay structure. ASI recruitment scales, the salaries offered, are currently below the UGC scales, that's the University Grants Commission scales, the standard for university professors and researchers in India.
So if you're a highly specialized expert in, say, archaeobotany or geoarchaeology, you've got a choice. A potentially better paying, arguably more prestigious university research post, or a lower paying ASI post doing crucial fieldwork in conservation management.
That seems to be the dilemma. And unsurprisingly, many top specialists choose the university route.
So this structural pay disparity means few top-tier aspirants even apply for these critical, specialized roles within the ASI.
Which leads to persistent vacancies or positions filled by less specialized personnel. This fundamental inability to attract and retain the necessary modern scientific talent severely undercuts the nation's capacity to protect its own past against increasingly complex modern challenges, from sophisticated smugglers using technology to the impacts of climate change on ancient structures.
It really shows that political will or national pride alone is insufficient, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You need the modernized institutions, the expertise, the resources on the ground.
Institutional capacity and modernization are absolutely key. Otherwise, the commitment to heritage remains largely symbolic. Hashtag outro.
Wow, this deep dive has taken us across millennia. We've connected Kautilya's incredibly detailed, sometimes ruthless state manual from ancient times,
to Gandhi's moral battlefield in South Africa, forging a new kind of political weapon.
and right up to the modern, ongoing struggle for institutional competence in preserving culture and managing diversity in contemporary India. The common thread seems to be this constant, difficult search for sustainable, effective, and somehow ethical governance.
I think that's right. The core conflict, or maybe the core dialogue, that defines India then and now really remains this question of means and ends. How do you balance power and principle?
We saw it in Kautilya's pragmatic insistence that even post-war ethical integration wasn't just nice, it was necessary to ensure political legitimacy and long-term control. Artha through Dharma, in a way.
And we saw it in Nehru's tireless promotion of unity and diversity, not just as an ideal, but as a necessary political tool for holding a complex nation together. India's journey seems characterized by this deep and often incredibly difficult engagement with ethical conviction, often at immense personal cost to its leaders and its people.
So the internal foundational conflicts that really define modern India's birth, Satyagraha versus armed military struggle, and the Bose-Gandhi split, or the battle over centralized national uniformity versus accommodating linguistic and cultural diversity. These aren't just settled history, are they?
Not at all. They feel like living, dynamic tensions. They fundamentally shape the country's immense and diverse political landscape today. These debates are ongoing, constantly being relitigated in new forms.
To synthesize the core takeaway then, perhaps we should return to Gandhi's powerful concluding thought from his reflections on the South African struggle. It's a principle that seems to echo across history and directly challenges Kautilya's realpolitik.
Which thought is that?
He wrote, "A thing can be retained by the same means by which it has been acquired. A thing acquired by violence can be retained by violence alone, while one acquired by truth can be retained only by truth."
Means and ends must align, essentially. The method you use to gain something dictates the method you'll need to keep it.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting for us today, thinking about everything we've discussed. If the foundational identity of modern Indian democracy was acquired, largely through a difficult, predominantly non-violent struggle, a struggle structured by a hard-won commitment to political ideals like pluralism, diversity, constitutionalism, truth-telling.
Even with all the compromises and contradictions along the way, yes, that's broadly the narrative.
Then what happens when the country faces these ongoing systemic corrosive challenges we've touched upon?
Challenges like the systemic theft of priceless cultural artifacts, driven partly by institutional underfunding and a critical lack of specialized expertise.
Yes, or the constant simmering tension between political desires for national homogeneity, maybe for efficiency or control, and the constitutional commitment to linguistic and cultural diversity that was so hard-won.
Or even Tagore's warning about social injustices weakening the political fabric from within.
Exactly. Considering all that, what new form of unified ethical conviction? Maybe what modern Satyagraha is needed today. Not necessarily focused on external enemies like colonialism, but maybe focused inwards on tackling internal institutional failure, combating corruption that enables heritage theft, addressing social injustices that breed division. What conviction must the nation wield today to retain, by means of truth and ethical action, the identity and the democracy it acquired through decades of immense struggle?
That's the provocative question, isn't it? If Gandhi's principle holds, then retaining a democracy won through truth requires a continuous recommitment to truth, to institutional integrity, and to addressing those internal unfreedoms Tagore warned about. What does that look like in practice in the 21st century? That's something for all of us, and especially for you, the listener, to ponder.
Echoes of the past, visions of tomorrow.